Hello, I'm Susan, and welcome to my studio. I just got a Christmas present from my daughter-in-law. It's this nifty palette of Derwent British pans of Inktense color. And the reason I wanted to investigate this is because I wanted to see if this might be a palette that would be fun to take out and about when I do plein air painting. So join me as I explore my new palette and see how I like it and see how I like the colors. I've used Inktense pencils in the past and I really like them. And I also have Inktense crayons and they're very, very intense. So I think this palette might be just the thing for me to get right in there and get some strong color on the page real quick while I'm trying to do a quick plein air sketch. So join me. So I'm opening my new palette. It has 24 colors, beautiful colors, and I always wet my palette before I begin to paint because I like really strong color. And I'm just throwing down a quick landscape here on a student grade Richardson watercolor paper. I'm mixing the blues in a sky. I'm trying out the various blues. I'm working wet into wet, going really fast. The nice thing about Inktense is that it has very intense color. It's essentially acrylic in a paint form, in a palette or a stick, like a watercolor palette that has dried. And so we're reconstituting it here. And usually with watercolor, once it is dried and you're working with dried watercolor in a palette, it isn't nearly this saturated when it's reconstituted like this. And I really love the saturation. In my notes below, I will be showing you a chart about the permanence of this paint. It isn't as light fast as a lot of my favorite brands of watercolor. I am a little bit concerned about that. I will be using it, I think, for sketching, but this is not a paint that I will trust to be a permanent paint for my more major paintings. So typical of me, I jumped right into the reds and pinks, and I wanted to test the saturation of some of these colors that are favorites of mine, and it really delivered. Here, I went into that lime green and splashed it around. I love to splash paint, but I got green in the sky, and this was helpful for me. Everything I'm trying here today is helpful. It's teaching me the properties of these paints, and I learned that I can lift them pretty well. The green lifted out of the sky pretty well, so I was satisfied with that. I'm just using a cheap calligraphy brush, Chinese calligraphy brush. I like to paint with not the finest brushes in the world. I like to think that I can rough something in with something like this, and if I lose it on a trip somewhere, it won't be the end of the world. So this is auditioning some paints and some brushes today. It's a good way to start out the year. This is January 1st, and I love to use a palette knife and scratch in and move some paints around. It sort of lends itself to the looks of a branch. So I'm trying to make a decision here about where I want to go from here. Again, I'm painting with my palette knife now. It's another way I just love to make marks. Popping in some, my paints aren't terribly wet, but I can scrape the corner of my palette knife and get some paint out of those pans. And don't know if you noticed, but I had been using my mouse, my computer's mouse, to prop up the top of the painting so that it didn't pool on this little piece of paper. But then suddenly I wanted to zoom in, so I had to take the mouse out from under the paper. And I'm trying to lift the color with a Q-tip. This is interesting. Inktense does not lift like watercolor paint. It lifted a little bit, but if I had been going into watercolor, I would be lifting back to the white of the paper pretty much, because this paint is quite wet. So this is very much more saturated color. It works kind of like an acrylic ink in terms of saturation. And never let it be said that I leave well enough alone. So I went back in. I really I like to go in and keep on working, and oftentimes when I'm doing a sketch, I'll push it past the comfort zone because I like to learn from my mistakes rather than be careful and cautious. This helps me when I go to do a major painting, to be able to play like this and push things, push the color, push the saturation of color, go back in and dance my brush around. I'm adding a little bit more here, a little bit of blossoms. And I'm now tempted to get out my Dr. P.H. Martin's Bleed Proof White and pop in some whites here, a little bit of lights. This is fun to do. Dr. P.H. Martin Bleed Proof White is a nice way to add lights back into a watercolor. You can also mix it with color, which I'll be doing in just a minute. But right here, I'm just taking it right out of the bottle and popping in a little bit of white. It really resembles the white of the paper, and when I'm sketching, it's kind of a nice way to do, to break up the color. And you can see it has dried, and now I put some bleed proof white on the side of my palette, and I'm introducing color to it. You never want to put bleed proof white into your paint pan, because when it dries, it forms an enamel like surface, and it's very difficult. It won't reconstitute. These Inktense colors, once they're painted, once they're laid down and dried, they also don't lift or reconstitute. But the bleed proof white forms an enamel surface, and you can't get, if you put it in your palette, you will have a hard time getting to the color underneath it. So you want to put it in your mixing area, and then I always clean it off at the end of my mixing. So here I have pushed this beyond the comfort zone, and there it is dry. So that was my experience with Inktense watercolor pan, and I hope you enjoyed watching, and please hit subscribe, and thank you very much.